Kyle here from All Media Reviews. This is now the sort of official start of the history, first year, sort of in effect, of modern progressive art rock, rather, modern progressive art rock. So this is for the year 2000, and the belief is I'm going to try to do this every year up until the present. I may forget stuff, of course, so I did the 90s yesterday and last week, and then eventually I'll intend to do stuff before 1990, maybe by decade, so the 60s, 70s, 80s, but those lists have sort of ballooned out, especially the 70s and 80s. So, all right, so starting in the year 2000, and this is it's gonna get more deep. I'm including stuff like debut albums and stuff that are debut albums or early albums that are not as important, I guess you could say, as others, but they're just the band is important. So I don't have physical copies of everything, of course, either. But so the first one is on February 22nd, 2000. Brian Jacobs and David Tobias, who later would come to form a band under the name Apes and Androids. They're the band previously known as Call Florence Pow on Sponge Bath Records released their only proper full length Call Florence Pow. These are the plans. Matt Mahaffey of Self was involved with this. I think he produced it, played some stuff on it. But anyway, it's a fun record. It's quirky. It does sound a fair amount like Self at points, but then you can hear where they would go with the other stuff with Call Florence Pow, the next release, the EP, and then Apes and Androids, of course. But they were pretty young, but ambitious, and it's quirky, electronic. Not the full indie tronica, but enough. Songs like Traveling, 3 and 4 parts tones, Valerie's Revenge, Experimental Times. Anyway, Call Florence Powell's These Are the Plans, released on February 22nd, 2000, to kick off the 2000s, the first sort of, in effect, sort of official year. I don't know if official year, but exactly. But so next I have on March 1st, it was just like whatever, a week later. I think 2000 was it? A leap year. It might have been. Um, Minnesota's own Lato and Wright put out their debut album, Ye Mariners All. While they're not as overtly like stylistically similar to some of the bands in this style, I guess, I see them as being very folk rock and having a Celtic influence, but still having prog and being artsy. And it was more like grounded in like sort of real world events, kind of real people kind of stuff that they wrote. But this is their debut album, Ye Mariners All. Um, they're the ones that have these really long song titles. You can see. John Wright had been in a King Crimson like band with Greg Harrigas in the late '80s, early '90s, and then he might have played with Greg Harrigas of the Product, but Us he was on too. But um, this is still, I mean, that was proggy and this is proggy, but this is still more folk prog, you could say. I don't know. Anyway, I'm including them in this list just because I feel like their music isn't overt prog. But it's prog enough so that sort of I think they fall under art rock as well. You Mariners All came out on March 1st in the year 2000 from Lato and Wright, Minnesota's own. So then a few weeks later, I talked about this a few videos in the CD A to Z. The Appleseed Cast from like I think they're from like Kansas City. Their second album. I didn't talk about their first album, but the second album, they were post rock, although they were sort of still finding their niche with that style. But Mayor Vitalis came out on March 14th, 2000. Again, not I've talked about that in the A to Z. It's not. I like other records from them more, but I don't know. They were sort of finding themselves again. It's from a sort of early stage of a band who'd go on to do other things. It was interesting to see that release in there. Then I don't have any physical copies of any of your CDs. You better, yeah, not be messing with that, Kaja. Um, the singer songwriter lead singer later go on to Tokyo GN, but she had her solo career. Sheena Ringo released maybe her most successful or popular solo album on March 31st, 2000, titled, well, I don't know how it's pronounced in Japanese, but Shoso Strip. Shoso or Shozo? Yeah, I mean it's very diverse in styles where it's art pop, noisy, art rock, progressive pop, J-pop, much of similar what Tokyo Jian would do, but it's Rate Your Music loves this. They love her and they love Tokyo Jian, so I'm not surprised it's really highly rated on that site. But her solo stuff is something that I've always liked, but I've never been able to spend enough time, like invest the time. And part of it is accessing it because I don't know if all of this, a lot of it is on Spotify and a lot of it is on YouTube, but I don't know. It's kind of mood music at this point, but I've always felt like I could get even more into her. I kind of lean toward Tokyo Jian a little more, but anyway, her second studio album, her debut album came out in '99. Could have probably been on the '90s list as well, but Show So Strip came out on March 31st, 2000. So a few days later, the influence of Britpop, and I didn't even mention that Britpop certainly had an influence on the progressive art rock stuff, Porcupine Tree included, actually. But Britpop band that was doing psychedelic and artsy stuff, more so than your Blurs and uh, the other band Oasis did. Doves. You could say Manson was doing it. Yeah, Doves kind of took the baton from Manson's from on Six. Lost Souls, the debut album from Doves, which has several really good songs. Songs like "Break Me Gently," "Rise," "Catch the Sun" is very catchy. I mean, some of it is more straight rock music. It has that Britpop element, but some of it is very trippy and textured and layered. Lost Souls, and it's like a concept album, but it's their debut album. Came out on um, or April 3rd, so a few days after the Chino Ringo record, 2000. So it's not the last we'll hear from Doves, but actually, this Push Comes to Shove, this has been my favorite Doves album, Lost Souls, coming out on April 3rd, 2000. And then another European band that I talked about in the '90s, the second '90s video, Mew followed up their debut album Triumph of Man from '97. Second album, Half the World Is Watching, came out on May 4th, 2000. And I definitely prefer this record over Triumph of Man. Not that I don't like Triumph of Man. Again, this is that version I've got with the double disc, that the re-release with the extra tracks and demos and stuff. But I mean, this has a fair number of songs that would end up on the record after it, re-recorded, Frengers, but it has some songs that weren't, and the arrangements are different, so it's like they're almost like reinventing the songs. The production quality isn't as good, but one song that's on here though, that and you could barely read it, of course, is King Christian. King Christian is a banger. It's like power popish. The hook in that song is infectious. I love that song. But I mean, it has 156 comforting sounds. Symmetry. Saliva is another one that's similar in tone to her. King Christian, very catchy, very kind of these like horns and stuff. Um, MIRI knows on this also. Earlier versions, like it's like they reinvented the song. So anyway, Half the World Is Watching from Mew, a step up from their debut album Triumph of Man, came out on May 4th, 2000. My wife's birthday, actually. Um, all right, moving on. So then a couple weeks later, before I didn't get into them until the next year. Actually, I found out they're gonna play Nearfest. Porcupine Tree puts out Lightbulb Sun, my number one Porcupine Tree album. Like, yeah, you can hear a Britpop element, but we're getting kind of heavy. Although this is still with drummer Chris Maitland, but this came out on May 22nd, in the year 2000. It's filled with just so many songs I love. She's Moved On, Last Chance to Evacuate Planet Earth Before It's Recycled, with the samples from the Branch Davidian Cult. Um, Very dreamy and trippy. Rest Will Flow, How's Your Life Today, the title track. Russia on Ice is sort of the epic that's 13 minutes. Um, yeah, it's a fantastic record, and if you listen to this and you listen to like a Spock's Beard or Transatlantic or Dream Theater, there's a clear difference in there. They're really more emphasizing just the melodic sense, where songs that are not about chops but about atmosphere and textures and stuff like that, but they're not. It's a departure from the earlier Porcupine Tree in the '90s, earlier '90s, even the Signify, where it was really purely space rock. So yeah, they're Porcupine Tree. Well, like every one of their records really fits in this sort of style. More so, even and again, I find this to be their most consistent record actually. Although the records that follow it are really good too. So that came out on May 22nd, 2000. So then let's see here. Yeah, then we had I did not find much, unfortunately, that came out that summer. Actually, the summer of 2000 was barren, or at least stuff that I'm not aware of or a fan of necessarily. But then in September, you had Self follow up and worked on Call for Pals. These are the plans, of course, early in that year. Their most, maybe in some ways, inventive record, Gizmogery, their most famous record, has the cover of What a Fool Believes, the Michael McDonald, Doobie Brothers song. But this entire album, Gizmogery, came out on September 5th, 2000, was recorded with child instruments. It has songs like, Trunkful Amps. The bridge in that is dreamy. Of course, it's got some Effenheimers and the pop culture references between Lenny Kravitz and Glenn Danzig and Freddie Mercury and ELO. It's that's the song that really made me a fan of Self. But Chameleon, I'm a Little Explosion, Patty Cake, Ordinaire is a banger. That's like purely power pop. I love Breakfast with Girls, and he continued some of the really great power pop, the influence from a Jellyfish and a Queen and an ELO on Gizmogery. And it was kind of like the sort of last proper Self album for a while, kind of based on and this was on the last label. This is on El Camino, but it was released on a major label, and it's like, at that point, Matt Mahaffey was trying to figure out what he was going to do after that. But anyway, Gizmogery from Self came out in September 5th. So then a week later, you have two records that came out, sort of that were important in the style to an extent. You had the proto, Mars Volta band at the Drive-In, put up their most famous, most successful record, Relationship of Command, right? Relationship of Command. And while at the Drive-In I would classify stylistically as sort of post-hardcore and punk, they were doing some things that were more experimental on here. You could sort of hear Cedric was just sounding better as a vocalist. And so I kind of feel like this is very important in what happened with when they go with the Mars Volta and the history. I mean, a ton of bands that are in this progressive art rock style were fans and were influenced by at the Drive-In, and specifically this last record of theirs, Relationship of Command, coming out on September 12th, 2000. Then the same day, we see Vast again put out their sophomore record, the second record, Music for People, which isn't as good as Visual Audio Sensory Theater, their debut record from a couple of years before, but it has maybe their best song, the most catchy song in Free. I think John Crosby was trying to play this is on Warner, is this on Elektra? Yeah, he was on a major label, so, but, this is a promo I've got here. Free, the last one alive, and I don't have anything. Yeah, I mean, it's still a good record. It's not maybe as artsy, but it still is artsy enough. I know, what is it? The guys in Fair to Midland, the singer, was a big fan of this band and this album specifically, Darrow. But anyway, that was September 12th, 2000, Vast Music for People. So then the next month, you had Radiohead. Of course, again, I'm not a fan, but I'm including because of the importance of this record. They were going more electronic from what I said. I've probably only listened to it's Kid A that came out October 2nd, 2000. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people admire that record more than OK Computer because it was so different. It was like, just an artist being progressive and that kind of thing. So, and it influenced a ton of the electronic elements of like Indie-tronica, and I'm sure. So, October 2nd, 2000, Radiohead's Kid A came out. Then the week after that, you see on October 9th, Godspeed You Black Emperor put out their, you thought, of course they put out many epic records, and even before they had that break, the hiatus. But this is their most famous record, probably always will be. The four like 18 to 20 minute pieces. Um, lift up. It's a mouthful. Not even on here because it's in a different language. Leves vos, but lift your skinny fists like antennas to heaven. Lift up your skinny fists on here. Lift your skinny fists like antennas to heaven. I mean, it's again no vocals. It's post rock. It's bleak post rock using samples and field recordings. But it's a trip. It flows pretty well. It's got the Godspeed crescendos and climaxes that I love. This is the album that got me into them. A guy compared this to Tales from Tropic Oceans, or it was also compared to Soft Machine's Third. I can sort of get that, where you're doing four distinct pieces, but they somehow connect. And yeah, I mean, it's not a record I'd listen to regularly, but for the right mood. And if I'm listening to a Godspeed record, although last time I listened to it, I felt like it waned a little bit. It kind of lagged or dragged, rather, the word I'm looking for. But anyway, Godspeed, you Black Emperors. Lift Your Skinny Fist Like Antennas to Heaven came out on October 9th, the year 2000, a week after the At the Drive-In and Vast albums. So, winding it down here in the year 2000, for modern progressive art rock, the New Pornographers, super group, which featured Nico Case and Dan Behar and AC Newman. Their album, which Nico Case is not from Canada, or at least she doesn't live. I know that the other guys might be based in Canada, but their debut album, Mass Romantic, which power pop. I like the title track especially. It's not run of the mill power pop. It's not power pop with sort of pop punk. It's they're a power pop band, but they weren't just like an average power pop band. You could see like with the vocal harmonies and stuff like Crosby, Stills and Nash, and Young, were an influence on them. And yeah, I mean they're not prog exactly, but they're artsy enough. And I feel like their early records, especially their last few records, have not been as successful to me. But Mass Romantic is one of their sort of essential records, and was their debut album. Came out on October 24th, and I feel like it influenced bands that came after it that combined power pop with the sort of artsy progressive stuff. So then I have no, the last one I have an actual like calendar date for is Chroma Key, that the follow up Kevin Moore, of course, after he left Dream Theater. And actually he had played on another Fates Warning album earlier this year, which I love, Disconnected. But Chroma Key's second album, You Go Now, came out on November 14th. He had a tendency to release albums late in the year. November 14th, 2000, which I've always wanted to get a physical copy of You Go Now, and you can find it. Have it like on Discogs and maybe eBay, but it's not as good as Dead Air for Radio's Bud. It has stuff like Another Permanent Address and Astronaut Down. It's more spacey, again, it's electronic, a lot of keyboards and piano. Not much piano really, but yeah, trip hop. You could say that Chroma Key had a big influence or was influenced by trip hop, like your Massive Attacks and the definitive trip hop bands. But yeah, You Go Now certainly belongs sort of in the pantheon of influencing a lot of the electronic stuff that came later. So I got two more records that I'm failing to really find one. Google says lists one date for January 1st, which when I see a January 1st release date, I believe it's really not true. Spotify has release dates for January 1st, and those aren't real either. But the debut album from Cloud Cult, though, Who Killed Puck, came out, Minnesota Zone, of course. They had the Shade Project and like a couple other like sort of independent demos that they had done before, but their sort of official debut album came out. It's listed as 2001, but it initially was released in 2000 locally, at least. Who Killed Puck? It has the song "Where It Starts," the first track actually, which talks about the reference about I found God in Steve Miller. Really like your peaches, let us shake your tree. I found God. Yeah, that sane as can be. It's it was a product of the early Cloud Cult records, which are more stripped down, more bedroom sort of DIY sounding. Craig Minowan was really the main driver behind most of the music. He still is to some degree, but he still is the main songwriter. But it's a charming debut album. Again, debut albums most people don't have expectations for, like whatever I mean, Mass Romantic, I'd say, is a better record than this, but it came out just a few weeks before that. But you just name your debut albums, but it's still a decent debut album, and Club Cult will go on to do such great things later. It's interesting just from a historical perspective to see that this album came out. Might have come out early in the year, might have come out late. I don't know. And the other obvious one that doesn't have any listed official release date at this point still, it's Kevin Gilbert's posthumous rock opera, The Shaming of the True, which I want to say I thought at one point saw it was released in November, but then again, some people got the books, that special book version, which I have over there, in like January or like in '99. So it might have come out earlier. Again, I didn't know him. I didn't pay attention to keep tabs on when this came out. I mean, it was finished like in '99 in effect. But yeah, it's a shame of the true, concept album about Johnny Virgil, kind of autobiographical in a lot of ways for Kevin. So many highlights. It's obviously one of my favorite records of all time. Image Maker, the definitive Image Maker, the City of the Sun, Water on the Bridge is so melancholy. Best Laid Plans, even I don't think it sounds exactly like Elton John, but a lot of people think it's sort of an Elton John style track. Then you have experimental, like dark stuff, like The Ghetto Beautiful Things, and Certified Number One Smash, Way Back Home. A lot of the songs that Giraffe he wrote himself, did himself, or did with Giraffe, or on the Call Me Kai stuff that were re-recorded with other people and just rearranged. But Suit Fugi, everyone knows that song because it sounds a lot like Gentle Giant. But anyway, The Shaming of the True. I don't know exactly what year, but it came out in the year 2000. What year? What month? What day it came out? It might have been early. Might have been. I thought I saw at one point a date of November. I don't know. I'm thinking when the multi disc eventually does show up, which is probably going to be sometime early to mid next year in 2025. We might actually have some kind of origin and more definitive time frame of when it was released. So that's the year 2000. I'm gonna try doing these per year, and they're gonna get longer. This is not a short list, but yeah, because there was just tons of it, tons of the stuff that came out. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.